report this bill without amendment presently. Members, we move to the second bill, which is the consideration of the Customs and Excise Tobacco Products Budget Measures Amendment Bills. And the question is that Part 1 stand part. Mr. Lees-Galloway.
Yes, that's right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the opportunity to speak on Part 1 of the Customs and Excise Tobacco Products Budget Measures Amendment Bill. Now, what Part 1 of this bill does is allow for four substantive 10% increases in the excise duty on tobacco products. And this is being done in the name of harm reduction, to reduce the harm caused by tobacco smoking in New Zealand. And it's been done in a way which, as has been discussed in earlier readings of this bill, actually follows the evidence for using tax increases or price increases to reduce the prevalence of smoking in a much stronger way than previous increases have done. And that's because it allows for four successive increases in price. And what the evidence tells us is that each time we have a price increase, then associated with that is a spike in quitting activity, whether that be people contacting organisations like Quitline, whether it be acquiring NRT, nicotine replacement treatments, a whole host of quitting activities. And we also know that as a result of those quitting activities, many people do remain tobacco-free as a result of those quit attempts. Although the nature of addiction being what it is, many people also go back to using cigarettes and other tobacco products after those quit attempts. But what we also know is that there is a brief period of activity after each increase that then tails off, and we return to a steady level of tobacco consumption, albeit hopefully lower than what it was previous to the increase. So with these consecutive increases, then what we should see is consecutive periods of quitting activity from people who are currently using tobacco, and that will assist in progressing New Zealand towards the goal of being smoke-free by 2025. But, Mr. Speaker, it is important to also note that this being a tax increase does generate additional revenue for the government. And Treasury estimates that this legislation will raise an additional $528 million for the government over the next 4 years. And what I found interesting, Mr. Speaker, is that for a piece of legislation that the government has proposed in the name of health and in the name of harm reduction, that this bill went not to the Health Select Committee, but to the Finance and Expenditure Select Committee, and in fact the reports, the regulatory impact statement and the departmental report were prepared by the Treasury, not by the Ministry of Health. And that is more appropriate for a bill which is purely designed as a revenue-gathering exercise rather than an exercise in improving the health and well-being of New Zealanders. Now, the chair of the Health Committee is looking at me a little bit perplexed and perhaps concerned that I might be suggesting this isn't a health measure and is in fact just a revenue-gathering exercise. I don't believe that, Mr. Hutchison. I do know that this is being done with the best intentions, the right intentions. But it does also raise money for the government, and it comes at an interesting time. It's interesting that the government has chosen now rather than the year before or the year before that, or even going back to the days when the National Party were in opposition to support a bill like this. And of course what we do know is that the government has been having a lot of trouble raising the revenue it requires because the economy is so sluggish at the moment. And so this does have a positive benefit for a government which is having a lot of trouble in its economic management at the moment. It's having some difficulty getting the economy moving along. This does have an additional benefit for the government in that it does raise some more revenue. That, of course, then begs the question, what ought the government do with that revenue? It's true that there are a number of measures the government could be undertaking in order to further tackle the prevalence of tobacco smoking, to further advance New Zealand towards that goal of being smoke-free by 2025, and that in fact would be a very, very good use for this money. Now, there are a range of things that the money being raised from tobacco, the sale of tobacco, Mr. Chair, the money raised from the sale of tobacco, whether it be through GST, whether it be through excise tax, obviously there is the expenditure on the treatment of people who have diseases that are related to smoking. There's of course tobacco. We know that tobacco is related to all the big four killers, not just big four killers, but big four creators of cost in the health system: cardiovascular disease, diabetes, respiratory disease, and of course cancer, which is well documented. So of course a lot of the money raised from the duties and excises and GST on tobacco products needs to be used to pay for those treatments. It also needs to be used to boost the health promotion activities that the government ought to be carrying out in order to convince people not to start smoking in the first place, and also to quit. And of course what we know is that one of the other strongly supported, one of the initiatives that has a strong evidence base behind it is social marketing that encourages people to quit. And in fact, if that social marketing was aligned to these tax increases, then that would have an additional effect of helping people or encouraging people to give up smoking. And unfortunately, the truth is that the government has reduced its spending on those social marketing initiatives, despite the fact that it is increasing its revenue from the sale of tobacco. There is a third area that needs to be covered as well, and this perhaps doesn't get as much consideration or debate in the public, and that is the fact that people who do get a disease that is related to smoking of tobacco products are less productive, they're less able to work, they therefore pay less tax. And there is a burden on the New Zealand taxpayer because of that loss of productivity that is related to tobacco smoking as well, and that ought to be covered off by the money raised through tobacco taxation too. But it is an important question that the government ought to answer. What is it planning to do with this additional money? Is this just making up for its economic failures? Is this just a way of filling the hole created by its unaffordable income tax cuts? As we've seen with a range of other levies and costs placed on the New Zealand taxpayer through indirect taxation that doesn't come through income tax, making up for that loss of income, or that loss of revenue from income tax, or will this money be used to get us closer to that goal of making New Zealand smoke-free by 2025? And I would appreciate an answer from the Minister on those questions, because I think they are important questions. People do accept that increasing the revenue that the government takes from tobacco is an effective measure, an effective method for reducing the harm caused by tobacco, but it does have an impact, particularly on low-income people who are addicted to tobacco products. And I note the Treasury actually acknowledged that in their regulatory impact statement, that the nature of addiction is that even if a product becomes more unaffordable, people may continue using it because they are addicted to it, and they don't necessarily make what most people might consider a logical decision about their use of that product. So given that that is the situation, it would be fair for the government to do more in terms of supporting people to quit, encouraging people to quit, and making sure that the types of replacement therapies, social marketing, all the other things that go along with encouraging less use of tobacco amongst the population of New Zealand would all be good things to be funded out of this money. So I do ask the Minister if he feels inclined to get to his feet to answer those questions on part one of this bill.
Andrew Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise to take a call on behalf